The bitter chill of November seeped through Marcus Johnson's threadbare coat, a testament to years of neglect. Huddled against the brick wall of St. Mary's Church, his weathered hands trembled, not from the cold, but from memories that refused to fade. None who passed him knew the hero who lived beneath layers of grime and forgotten dignity. None until someone glimpsed the medal he kept hidden from the world. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The early morning light cast long shadows across Franklin Park as Marcus stirred from his makeshift bed of flattened cardboard and newspapers. The dew had soaked through, leaving a damp chill that settled in his bones. At 62, each morning brought new aches, new reminders of a body worn down by years on the streets and memories of a war long past. He folded his bedding with military precision, a habit 30 years of homelessness couldn't erase, and tucked it behind the massive oak tree that had become his reluctant home. The park slowly came to life around him. Joggers, inexpensive. Athletic wear circled the perimeter, their breath forming small clouds in the crisp autumn air. Office workers cut through on their way to downtown, clutching coffee cups and avoiding eye contact with the old man they'd learned to see through. Marcus had become part of the landscape, as invisible as the squirrels gathering acorns for winter, but far less worthy of attention. He reached inside his coat, fingers finding the small metal object tucked in an inner pocket. A ritual performed every morning, making sure it was still there. The medal was the one thing he couldn't bear to part with, even during the worst times when hunger gnawed at his stomach and pawnshops offered temporary salvation. It remained his secret, his shame, his treasure. The city of Westbridge had little patience for its homeless population. Recent ordinances had criminalized sleeping in doorways, panhandling near businesses, and aggressive loitering, a term so vague it could be applied to nearly any undesired presence. Marcus had adapted, learning to move like a ghost through the city he had once proudly called home. "Morning, old-timer," called Elijah, another veteran who had found himself on the streets after too many failed attempts at reintegration. At 55, he was younger than Marcus but looked a decade older, his face mapped with deep lines and broken capillaries from years of self-medication. "Morning," Marcus replied, his voice a gravelly whisper from disuse. Words were precious, commodities, not to be wasted on pleasantries when they could be saved for necessary negotiations with police officers who might grant another hour before moving him along, or with shelter staff who might overlook that he'd already used his allotted nights for the month. "Gonna be cold tonight," Elijah observed, pulling his own thin jacket tighter around his frame. "Shelter's opening the overflow section. You coming?" Marcus shook his head. The shelters, with their crowded conditions and institutional smells, triggered memories he'd spent decades trying to suppress. The noise, the confined spaces, the unpredictable outbursts from fellow residents, each element conspired to transport him back to jungles and rice paddies, to moments when death had seemed preferable to one more second of terror. "Suit yourself," Elijah shrugged, "but they're saying snow by midnight." Marcus watched him shuffle away, shoulders hunched against a world that had forgotten its promises to those who had served. He knew he should reconsider the shelter, knew the foolishness of pride in the face of hypothermia, but some battles couldn't be fought with logic alone. Instead, he gathered his few possessions, a tattered backpack containing a change of clothes, a dog-eared paperback with missing pages, a plastic water bottle refilled at public fountains, and began his daily migration. The public library opened at 9, offering warmth and anonymity until 4. Then the community center until 6, pretending to watch the bulletin board for job postings that would never materialize for a man his age with his history. After that, the 24-hour laundromat, until the owner recognized him and demanded he leave. Each location a temporary reprieve, each transition a reminder of his tenuous existence. As he walked, Marcus maintained the straight-backed posture that had been drilled into him decades earlier. Some habits were so deeply ingrained they survived everything: homelessness, alcoholism, despair. He might wear clothing salvaged from donation bins, might go days without a proper shower, but he would never slouch. Small dignities were all that remained. 3 blocks from the library, the skies opened. Cold November rain, the kind that seemed designed to seek out every vulnerability, every threadbare patch of clothing. Marcus quickened his pace, his arthritic knee protesting with each step. The awning of Carlson's diner offered temporary shelter, and he pressed himself against the building, trying to become invisible to the patrons inside. Through the window, he could see families enjoying warm breakfasts, waitresses carrying steaming plates of eggs and pancakes, cups of coffee being refilled. The scene was painfully ordinary, achingly normal. A world that had continued without him, a life he could observe but never again participate in. "Hey, move it along!" The manager's voice cut through Marcus's reverie. The man stood in the doorway, arms crossed, face set in the expression Marcus had come to recognize, disgust thinly veiled by bureaucratic authority. "You're bothering the customers." "Just waiting out the rain," Marcus said quietly, already knowing it was futile. "Rain or shine, you can't loiter here. There's a shelter on Elm Street." "Yes, sir." The military response slipped out before Marcus could stop it. He stepped back into the downpour, water immediately soaking through the worn canvas of his shoes. The library, when he finally reached it, was blessedly warm. Marcus found his usual spot in the back corner, near the reference section that few people visited. He took out his paperback, a thriller missing its final chapters, and pretended to read, actually using the time to let his socks dry slightly in the building's heat. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Excuse me, sir." The librarian's voice was soft but firm. Marcus tensed, preparing for another rejection, another request to move along. Instead, she held out a paper cup. "Thought you might like some tea. It's dreadful out there today." Surprised, Marcus accepted the cup with hands he couldn't prevent from trembling slightly. "Thank you, ma'am." She smiled, not the practiced smile of social services professionals, but a genuine expression that reached her eyes. "I'm Diana. You're here most days, aren't you?" Marcus nodded, uncomfortable with the direct attention. "Well, just so you..." "No, we're having a veterans outreach event this afternoon. Representatives from the VA, housing assistance, that sort of thing." She gestured to a poster on the wall that Marcus had deliberately avoided looking at. "No pressure, but they might have resources that could help." "I'm fine, ma'am," Marcus said automatically, the response worn smooth from years of use. Diana nodded, respecting his boundaries but clearly unconvinced. "The offer stands. They'll be here until closing." She moved away, returning to her desk. Without pushing further, Marcus sipped the tea, warmth spreading through his chest. Small kindnesses were dangerous. They threatened the careful emotional fortress he'd constructed over decades. The walls that kept hope at bay. Hope was a luxury for people with futures. For Marcus, survival depended on accepting the permanent. Present, neither looking back nor forward. The afternoon wore on, the library gradually filling with after-school students and people escaping the persistent rain. Marcus remained in his corner, periodically checking the large clock on the wall, calculating the hours until he would need to move again. At 3:30, a group of men and women in professional attire arrived, setting up tables near the entrance, veterans outreach, as Diana had mentioned. Marcus watched from behind his book as other homeless veterans, some he recognized from The park, or the shelter, approached the tables. They filled out forms, spoke earnestly with the representatives, accepted pamphlets and business cards. The scene stirred something in Marcus, a distant memory of his own initial return, of believing that services existed to help him transition back to civilian life. The reality had been different. Overwhelmed systems, endless paperwork, appointments, scheduled months apart. Nightmares that left him drenched in sweat and unable to maintain regular work. The gradual descent had been almost inevitable, first losing his apartment, then sleeping in his car until it was repossessed, finally joining the invisible army of those who existed on the margins. Marcus Johnson. The name, spoken aloud, in the quiet library, jolted him from his thoughts. A woman stood at the Veterans Outreach table, holding a clipboard, looking around expectantly. "Is there a Marcus Johnson here today?" She called again, slightly louder. Marcus shrank further into his corner. His name, his real name, not the mic he sometimes used at shelters, was jarring to hear in public. How did they know he was here? What did they want? Diana, the kind librarian, glanced in his direction but said nothing, respecting his obvious desire for anonymity. The outreach worker eventually sat back down, making a notation on her clipboard. Heart racing, Marcus gathered his meager belongings. The library no longer felt safe. Someone had identified him, was looking for him. Old paranoia, never fully, dormant, flared to life. Had someone recognized him from before? Were there new charges being filed for sleeping in the park? Or worse, had someone connected him to what happened in Quangtri province all those years ago? He slipped out a side exit, back into the rain that had now turned to a freezing drizzle. The community center was 6 blocks away. He would be soaked by the time he arrived, but it was preferable to being found, to being forced to confront whichever piece of his past had resurfaced. Halfway there, exhaustion and hunger forced him to pause. The overhang of a closed flower shop provided minimal shelter as he leaned against the brick wall, trying to gather strength for the remaining distance. His knee throbbed in time with his heartbeat, the old injury a constant companion in cold, wet weather. "You look like you could use this more than me," a voice said. Marcus turned to find a young man holding out a paper bag. The logo on the side identified it as coming from the sandwich shop across the street. "I ordered the wrong thing," the young man continued, clearly lying but doing so with kindness. "Ham and cheese. Would hate to see it go to waste." Pride warred with hunger in Marcus's mind. He hadn't begged, hadn't asked for charity, but the young man's approach, offering the food as a favor to himself rather than an act of pity, provided a thin veneer of dignity. "Thank you," Marcus said, accepting the bag. The young man nodded and continued on his way, not lingering to witness Marcus's gratitude or discomfort. Inside the bag was a substantial sandwich, a bag of chips, and a bottle of water. Marcus ate, slowly, deliberately, making the unexpected bounty last. The food revived him, giving him the energy to continue to the community center. The Westbridge Community Center was housed in a repurposed elementary school, its institutional architecture softened by murals and community art projects. Marcus slipped inside, nodding to the receptionist who had stopped asking his business months ago. He made his way to the bulletin board room, where mismatched chairs and tables offered a place to sit while pretending to search through job listings and apartment advertisements. The room was nearly empty today, the weather keeping most people at home. Only Mrs. Patel, an elderly woman who came every day to use the free internet to video chat with grandchildren overseas, occupied one of the computer stations. She smiled at Marcus as he entered, a courtesy he acknowledged with a slight nod. He selected a chair in the corner, positioning himself to watch both the entrance and the window, another habit from years when hypervigilance had been necessary for survival. The warm air of the building began to dry his wet clothing, creating a slight steam that carried the musty odor of garments too long between washes. A poster on the bulletin board caught his eye, not for its content, but for its header. Veterans, Crisis Support. Below was information about a new initiative in Westbridge, a coordination of services specifically designed for homeless veterans. The contact person listed was Dr. Eleanor Richards, Director of Veterans Services. The name triggered a vague recollection. Marcus closed his eyes, trying to place it. Dr. Richards. Had he encountered her during one of his brief periods in the VA system? Or was it from before, from his initial discharge and attempted reintegration? Mr. Johnson, Marcus Johnson. For the second time that day, his name cut through his thoughts. A man stood in the doorway of the bulletin board room, middle-aged, with graying temples and the straight posture that immediately identified him as military, despite the civilian clothes. "My name is Robert Keller. I'm with the Veterans Outreach Program." He approached slowly, as one might approach a wary animal. "Do you have a moment to talk?" Marcus's eyes darted to the exits. The community center suddenly felt like a trap. How had they found him here? What did they want? "You're not in any trouble," Keller said, reading his body language. "Quite the opposite, actually. Dr. Richards at the VA has been trying to locate you." "Why?" Marcus asked, the word barely audible. "She didn't give me all the details, just asked me to find you and give you this." Keller held out a business card. "She said to tell you it's about Quang Tri." The name of the province hit Marcus like a physical blow. Quang Tri, the place where everything had changed, where he had become both more and less than himself. The place he had spent 30 years trying to forget. "I don't know what happened there," Keller continued, "before my time, but Dr. Richards seems to think it's important that she speak with you." Marcus took the card, his fingers numb. "Dr. Eleanor Richards, Director of Veterans Services, Westbridge VA Medical Center, a phone number, an email address, an office location." Pathways back to a world he had long ago accepted was closed to him. "She said you can come any time, no appointment necessary." Keller hesitated, then added, "And she asked me to tell you that Sergeant Taylor's daughter is looking for you." Taylor. Another name from the past, another ghost. Marcus closed his eyes, seeing again the young sergeant's face, hearing his voice in those final moments. The memories he had spent decades drowning in alcohol, burying beneath layers of isolation, came rushing back with devastating clarity. "Thank you," Marcus managed, his voice steadier than he expected. "I'll think about it." Keller seemed about to say more, then changed his mind. He nodded respectfully, one veteran to another, and left, his mission complete. Marcus sat motionless, the business card heavy in his hand. Outside, the freezing drizzle had transformed into the promised snow, large flakes visible through the community center windows. The practical part of his mind registered that he needed to make decisions about shelter for the night. The temperature would drop below freezing. The overflow section Elijah had mentioned was his best option, but these immediate concerns seemed distant, overshadowed by the sudden intrusion of the past. Quang Tri, Taylor, names and places he had locked away, believing they could no longer reach him. Now they had found him, even here, even in his carefully constructed invisibility. Mrs. Patel finished her video call and gathered her belongings, smiling again at Marcus as she left. The bulletin boardroom was now empty except for him, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the heating system and the occasional squeak of a chair as he shifted his weight. Slowly, with hands that had begun to tremble again, Marcus reached, inside his coat, to the inner pocket, where he kept his most valuable possession. The Medal of Honor, tarnished with age but still recognizable, lay heavy in his palm. The ribbon was frayed, the metal dulled, but the significance remained unchanged. Awarded for actions above and beyond the call of duty. Presented by the president himself in a ceremony Marcus had attended in a fog of grief and medication. He had never worn it publicly, had never displayed it or spoken of it. It remained his burden, his contradiction, a symbol of the worst day of his life recast as his greatest achievement. The medal represented everything he couldn't reconcile, honor received for actions he couldn't remember clearly, recognition for surviving when others had died, gratitude from a nation that had ultimately abandoned him. Marcus returned the medal to its hiding place next to his heart. He folded the business card carefully and placed it in the same pocket. Then he gathered his backpack, nodded to the receptionist on his way out, and stepped into the falling snow. The sidewalks were already dusted white, the traffic moving slowly on increasingly slick streets. Marcus moved with purpose now, heading not toward the shelter as logic dictated, but toward the small Catholic church 6 blocks away. St. Michael's kept its doors open until 10, ostensibly for prayer, but in practice offering sanctuary to those with nowhere else to go during the early evening hours. The church was nearly empty when he arrived, only an elderly woman in the front pew and a maintenance worker changing light bulbs in the vestibule. Marcus slipped into the back row, grateful for the warmth and the silence. Unlike the shelters with their institutional chaos, the church offered a different kind of peace, one that asked nothing of him, demanded no paperwork or sobriety pledges or mandatory chapel services. He sat motionless, watching snowflakes swirl past the stained glass windows. The weight of the medal against his chest seemed heavier than usual, as if responding to the day's events. The business card burned in his pocket, a portal to a past he had spent decades fleeing. Dr. Eleanor Richards. The name continued to tug at his memory. Had they met during his brief stays at VA hospitals? Was she one of the countless professionals who had tried to help him before he disappeared into the anonymous ranks of the chronically homeless? And Taylor's daughter. What could she possibly want from him? To hear about her father's final moments, to understand why Marcus had lived while Taylor had died, to forgive him, to blame him. The possibilities were overwhelming, each one carrying its own particular dread. Marcus closed his eyes, suddenly exhausted beyond measure. The day's emotions, fear, surprise, reluctant hope, renewed grief, had depleted his carefully conserved energy. The church's heating system created a background hum that lulled him toward an unexpected doze. He didn't hear the soft footsteps approaching, didn't notice the presence beside him until a gentle voice spoke. "I hope I'm not disturbing you." Marcus startled awake, years of street survival instincts bringing him instantly to full alertness. Beside him stood an older man in the collar of a priest, his face weathered but kind. "The church is open for another hour," the priest continued. "You're welcome to stay." "Thank you, Father," Marcus replied automatically. The priest sat in the pew across the aisle, not crowding Marcus, but not leaving either. "I'm Father Daniel. I haven't seen you here before." Marcus hesitated, weighing the risk of conversation against the respect due to the man offering shelter. "Marcus," he finally said, "just passing through." Father Daniel nodded, accepting the minimal information. "Nasty weather tonight. The rectory basement is open if you need a place to sleep. Not official, you understand, but we have cots set up." The offer was tempting, a quiet alternative to the crowded shelter. But Marcus shook his head. "Thank you, but I have arrangements." The lie came easily after years of practice, part of the protective facade he maintained with authority, figures of all kinds. "Of course." Father Daniel didn't push. "The offer stands should your arrangements fall through." He rose, moving toward the front of the church, then paused. "I served as a chaplain, you know, 2 tours in Afghanistan. If you ever want to talk, Not necessarily about faith, just about anything. My door is always open. The revelation that the priest was also a veteran shifted something in Marcus's perception. The man wasn't just another well-meaning civilian offering temporary charity. He was someone who might actually understand. "I was in Vietnam," Marcus said, surprising himself with the disclosure. Father Daniel turned back, his expression unchanged, but his eyes more focused. "Different war, same wounds, often enough," he said quietly. "The basement door is around the side, blue light above it, no questions asked, no services required." He continued toward the altar, leaving Marcus with his thoughts. The conversation had been brief but significant, the most meaningful human interaction he had experienced in longer than he could remember. Not because of what was said, but because of what wasn't. No judgment, no forced gratitude, no expectation of a life-changing epiphany from a single act of kindness. Outside, the snow continued to fall, accumulating now on streets and sidewalks. Through the church windows, Marcus could see that the world was being transformed, the grime and decay of the city covered by a temporary blanket of white. By morning, it would be trampled and dirty again, but for this moment, even the most neglected corners of Westbridge were being renewed. Marcus reached again for the medal in his pocket, running his thumb over the raised design. The gesture had become almost superstitious over the years, a grounding in his identity when everything else had been stripped away. The business card seemed to burn against his fingers as he touched it. Dr. Eleanor Richards, Sergeant Taylor's daughter, Quang Tri. The past reaching into the present, refusing to remain buried despite his decades of effort. Tomorrow, he decided. Tomorrow, he would go to the VA Medical Center, not with hope. Hope was too dangerous, too easily crushed, but with resignation. Whatever was waiting for him there, whatever ghosts had finally tracked him down, he would face them. Not for himself, but for Taylor, for all of them who hadn't made it back. Marcus Johnson, once Staff Sergeant Johnson, Medal of Honor recipient, now simply an old man seeking shelter from the snow, leaned back in the church pew and allowed himself just for a moment to remember who he had been. The morning dawned. Clear and brittle, the previous night's snow transformed into a crystalline crust beneath a merciless sun. Marcus woke in the church basement, surrounded by 6 other men on identical cots. Despite his initial refusal, the bitter cold had eventually driven him to Father Daniel's offered sanctuary. Sleep had come in fractured increments, interrupted by the usual nightmares, helicopter rotors, shouted commands, the sickening smell of blood and jungle rot. He rose before the others, folding the thin blanket with hospital corners. Old habits. Even at his lowest, certain disciplines remained. The basement was silent except for the soft snores of the other men and the distant rumble of the heating system struggling against the winter chill. Marcus moved quietly, gathering his few possessions, careful not to disturb those still sleeping. Many, like him, found uninterrupted rest elusive, a luxury reserved for those without memories that ambushed them in the dark. A coffee urn had been set up on a folding table near the stairs, alongside a tray of packaged muffins. Marcus hesitated, then poured himself a cup. The familiar warmth between his palms was comforting, the rich aroma momentarily overwhelming the musty scent of the basement and its occupants. "Early riser," observed Father Daniel, descending the stairs with a newspaper tucked under his arm. "Military habit?" Marcus nodded, surprised again at how easily the priest's presence loosened his customary silence. Hard to break, even after all these years. The priest poured his own coffee, then gestured toward a small office off the main basement area. "More comfortable in there, if you'd like." Something in the casual offer, the absence of pity or forced cheer, made it acceptable. Marcus followed him into the modest space, taking a seat in one of two worn armchairs, positioned near a small electric heater. "Roads are better than expected," Father Daniel commented, opening his newspaper. "They had the plows out all night." The mundane observation settled Marcus, anchoring him in ordinary reality rather than the momentous decision that loomed before him. They sat in companionable silence, sipping coffee, Father Daniel reading his paper, Marcus watching the strengthening sunlight filter through the small basement window. "I have somewhere to go today," Marcus finally said, surprising himself with the disclosure. Father Daniel looked up, his expression neutral. "Need a ride?" "The church has a van." "No." Marcus shook his head. "It's not far. The VA medical center was only 15 blocks away, a walkable distance, even with his bad knee." "Well, the offer stands." The priest returned to his newspaper, respecting Marcus's reticence. Marcus finished his coffee and stood, his arthritic joints protesting after a night on the thin mattress. "Thank you for the cot." Father Daniel nodded. "Any time, no questions asked." The lack of probing, of demands for his story or his gratitude, made leaving both easier and more difficult. Marcus had grown accustomed to being invisible, to transactions based on need rather than recognition. The simple acknowledgement of his humanity was almost more disorienting than the prospect of confronting his past. Outside, the morning sun had already begun melting the snow on exposed surfaces, though drifts remained in shaded areas. Marcus walked carefully, mindful of icy patches on the sidewalk. His breath formed clouds in the frigid air as he made his way toward downtown, toward the VA medical center, toward whatever waited for him there. The business card was still in his inner pocket, alongside the medal. He had memorized the address, the office number, Dr. Eleanor Richards, Director of Veterans Services. The name continued to tug at his memory, a persistent whisper he couldn't quite place. The VA Medical Center loomed ahead, a sprawling complex of brick buildings and newer additions. Marcus had avoided the place for years, his experiences there, a mixed tapestry of genuine help and bureaucratic nightmares. Now, standing before the main entrance, he fought the urge to turn away, to return to the relative safety of his invisibility. "You lost, buddy?" A security guard had materialized beside him, the question carrying the unmistakable edge of someone accustomed to moving the homeless along. "I have an appointment," Marcus replied, the lie easier than explaining the truth. "Dr. Richards, Veterans Services." The guard's demeanor shifted slightly. "Building C, 3rd floor." He pointed toward a red brick structure to the right. "You'll need to go through security screening." Marcus nodded his thanks and moved in the indicated direction, aware of the guard's eyes following him. His appearance, the layers of worn clothing, the unkempt beard, the general air of neglect, made him an object of suspicion in such settings. Once he had worn a uniform that commanded respect. Now he wore the invisible badge of society's discards. Building C was bustling with morning activity, veterans of all ages navigating the complex system, staff moving purposefully between offices, volunteers escorting elderly patients. Marcus felt immediately conspicuous, his dirty clothing and unwashed state drawing sidelong glances from those around him. He joined the security line, emptying his pockets into the plastic bin as directed, the medal and business card he kept in his hand, unwilling to place them in the impersonal container. The security officer, a young woman with tired eyes, waved him through the metal detector without comment. The elevator was crowded, forcing Marcus into uncomfortable proximity with others. He stood in the corner, eyes downcast, trying to minimize the space he occupied. A middle-aged woman in scrubs shifted slightly away from him, her nose wrinkling at his odor. He pretended not to notice, had years of practice at becoming invisible even when physically present. The third floor was quieter, its corridors lined with offices rather than examination rooms. Marcus followed the signs to veteran services, each step bringing him closer to whatever confrontation awaited. The medal in his pocket seemed to grow, heavier, a tangible reminder of everything he had buried, everything he had run from. The reception area was empty, except for a young man behind a desk, typing intently at a computer. He looked up as Marcus entered, his professional smile faltering only slightly at the sight of the disheveled visitor. "Can I help you?" he asked, voice carefully neutral. "Dr. Richards," Marcus said, producing the business card from his pocket. "I was told to come." The receptionist's eyes widened slightly. "You're Marcus Johnson." The recognition in the young man's voice was unsettling. "Yes. Dr. Richards has been hoping you'd come in. Let me tell her you're here." He picked up a phone, pressed an extension. "Dr. Richards, Marcus Johnson is here to see you." A pause. "Yes, right away." He hung up, his expression now tinged with something Marcus couldn't quite identify. Respect, perhaps, or curiosity. "She'll be right out. Would you like some water while you wait?" The offer, so ordinary in its courtesy, caught Marcus off guard. When had someone last offered him water in a glass, instead of directing him to a public fountain? "Yes, thank you." The receptionist fetched a paper cup from a water cooler, handling it to Marcus with the same respect he might show any visitor. Marcus accepted it with a nod, then took a seat in one of the chairs arranged along the wall, careful to choose one at a distance from the desk. The water was cool and clean, washing away the lingering taste of church basement coffee. Marcus was finishing it when a door opened, and a woman in her 50s emerged. She was tall and slender, with short silver hair and wire-rimmed glasses. Her movements were precise, efficient, suggesting a military background despite her civilian clothes. "Mr. Johnson," she said, extending her hand. "I'm Eleanor Richards. Thank you for coming." Marcus stood, automatically straightening his posture despite his disheveled appearance. The handshake was firm, professional, without the hesitation many showed when touching someone in his condition. "Please, come into my office." She gestured toward the open door behind her. The office was surprisingly modest for a director. Functional, rather than imposing. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled with medical texts and military histories. The desk was orderly, with files neatly stacked and family photos arranged in simple frames. A window overlooked the VA campus, snow still visible on the distant lawns. "Have a seat." Dr. Richards indicated a chair opposite her desk. As Marcus sat, she remained standing, moving to a small refrigerator in the corner. "Would you like something to drink? Water? Coffee? I have sodas as well." "Coffee," Marcus replied, the normalcy of the interaction still disconcerting. "Black." She poured 2 cups from a carafe on a side table, handed one to Marcus, then took her seat behind the desk. For a moment, she simply studied him, her gaze, direct but not intrusive. "You don't remember me, do you?" she finally asked. Marcus looked at her more carefully, searching for something familiar in her features. "Should I?" "I was an intern here when you first came through the system, 1975. You were one of my first patients." She smiled slightly. "I had just finished medical school, was still figuring out which specialty to pursue." The year triggered a vague recollection, his initial processing through the VA system, a blur of examinations and evaluations, all viewed through the haze of grief and medication. "I don't remember much from that time." "No, I imagine you wouldn't. You were heavily medicated, still recovering from your physical injuries." She took a sip of her coffee. "But I remembered you. Not many Medal of Honor recipients came through our doors." Marcus stiffened at the direct reference to the medal. Few people knew about it. He had made sure of that. "How did you find me?" "We didn't, not exactly. It was more coincidence than anything. She leaned forward slightly. A woman named Catherine Taylor contacted the VA looking for information about her father, Sergeant James Taylor. He was killed in action in Vietnam, Quang Tri Province. She's been trying to connect with members of his unit. The name sent a jolt through Marcus. Taylor, his friend, his sergeant, his nightmare, the man whose death had haunted him for 30 years. During her research, she came across your name. When she discovered you were a Medal of Honor recipient, she became particularly interested in talking with you. Dr. Richards paused. The VA couldn't give her your contact information, of course, but it made me wonder what had happened to you. I checked your records and found they stopped abruptly in 1994. No more benefits claims, no medical visits, nothing. I left the system, Marcus said simply. The reality was more complex. A gradual descent into homelessness, addiction, and isolation. A deliberate separation from a society he no longer felt part of. So I gathered, but once I started looking, asking around at shelters and outreach programs, your name kept surfacing. Sightings, stories. She gestured toward the window, toward the city beyond. You've been in Westbridge all this time, just outside our doors. The realization that he had been tracked, however benevolently, sent a wave of unease through Marcus. His anonymity had been his protection, his invisibility, a carefully maintained shield. "What do you want from me?" he asked, his voice rough. With sudden tension, Dr. Richards' expression softened. "It's not what I want, Mr. Johnson. It's what Catherine Taylor wants, and perhaps what you might need." "I don't need anything." The response was automatic, a defensive reflex honed by years of institutional interactions. "Everyone needs something," she replied, not unkindly. "Connection, purpose, understanding, forgiveness." She let the last word hang in the air between you them. "Catherine Taylor will be here tomorrow. She's flying in from Seattle specifically to meet with you." The prospect of facing Taylor's daughter, of being forced to remember, to explain, to relive that day in Quang Tri, sent a wave of panic through Marcus. He set down his coffee cup with a shaking hand. "I can't or won't." Dr. Richards' question was gentle but direct. "What would I say to her? That I watched her father die? That I couldn't save him?" The words escaped before Marcus could stop them, the first acknowledgement of his burden in decades. You could tell her the truth, whatever that is. Dr. Richards leaned back slightly. "Mr. Johnson, do you know why you received the Medal of Honor?" The question caught him off guard. "For actions in Quang Tri." "Yes, but do you remember what those actions were?" Marcus closed his eyes, memories threatening to overwhelm him. The jungle heat, the ambush, the frantic firefight. Taylor going down, blood spreading across his uniform, the enemy advancing. His own actions after that were a blur, pieced together later from the accounts of others. "Not clearly," he admitted. "I was wounded. There are gaps." Dr. Richards nodded, as if this confirmed something she had suspected. "That's not uncommon with traumatic events, especially those involving head injuries, which you sustained." She opened a drawer, removed a thick file. "This is your military record, including the citation for your Medal of Honor and the witness statements that supported it." She pushed the file across the desk toward him. Marcus stared at it without touching it, as if it might burn him. "I think you should read it before you meet Catherine Taylor," Dr. Richards continued. "It might help you understand why she's so eager to meet you." "And if I don't want to meet her?" Marcus challenged, a last attempt at maintaining the walls he had built around his past. "That's your choice. I won't force you, and neither will she." Dr. Richards's voice remained calm. "But I think you've been running from this for a very long time, Mr. Johnson. Maybe it's time to stop." The simple truth of her words penetrated Marcus's defenses. He had been running from memories, from responsibility, from the very honor that others saw in his actions. Running until he had nowhere left to go, no identity left except that of a homeless veteran, anonymous and forgotten. With a hesitant hand, he reached for the file, opening it to the first page. His own face stared back at him, younger, clean-shaven, eyes clear but already haunted. The official portrait taken just after the medal ceremony, before everything fell apart. "I'll give you some time with this," Dr. Richards said, rising from her desk. "Take as long as you need. I'll be in the conference room down the hall when you're ready to talk." She left quietly, closing the door behind her. Marcus stared at the photo, barely recognizing himself in the young soldier with the 1,000-yard stare. Then he began to read, each word calling forth memories he had spent, decades trying to bury. The citation was clinical in its description, military language, stripping the horror from events that had destroyed lives. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity at the risk of his life above and beyond the call of duty. The familiar phrases washed over him, simultaneously true and insufficient. What the citation couldn't capture was the chaos, the fear, the split-second decisions made without thought. It couldn't convey the smell of the jungle, the sound of Taylor's labored breathing as Marcus dragged him toward cover, the weight of the radio as he called for evacuation, the witness statements, filled in details Marcus had lost to trauma and time. How he had returned to the exposed position 3 times, each time bringing back a wounded comrade. How he had established a defensive perimeter, coordinated supporting fire, and maintained it until evacuation arrived despite his own injuries. How he had carried Taylor's body the final distance to the helicopter, refusing to leave him behind, even after it was clear he was gone. Reading the accounts, Marcus felt a strange disconnection, as if they described someone else, some other soldier who had performed these acts of courage. Not the broken man he had become, certainly not the homeless veteran who had spent decades hiding from his own identity. The last page was different, a handwritten letter from James Taylor's wife, dated just after the medal ceremony. In it, she thanked Marcus for his efforts to save her husband, for bringing him home when so many were left behind. "James always said you were the best of them," she wrote, "the quiet one who could be counted on when everything went to hell. He was proud to serve with you. Our daughter Catherine will know that her father died a hero, and that his brothers did everything possible to save him." The letter blurred as unexpected tears filled Marcus's eyes. He had never seen it before, had been too lost in his own grief and guilt to connect with Taylor's family after the ceremony. The simple absolution it offered, the recognition that he had done everything possible, was both a balm and a reopening of old wounds. A soft knock at the door startled him. Dr. Richards entered, carrying a fresh cup of coffee and a sandwich on a paper plate. "Thought you might be hungry," she said, placing them on the desk beside the file. Marcus realized he had been reading for over an hour, lost in the past. "Thank you," he said, his voice hoarse with emotion. She sat down across from him again, her expression compassionate but professional. "Take your time. There's no rush." Marcus closed the file, unable to continue. The sandwich remained untouched, his appetite vanished beneath the weight of memory. "Why now?" he asked. "After all these years, why is Taylor's daughter looking for me now? She only recently began researching her father's service. Her mother kept everything related to Vietnam packed away, too painful to discuss." Dr. Richards adjusted her glasses. "Catherine was an infant when he died. She's never known any of the men who served with him." The thought of Taylor's daughter, a woman now older than her father had been when he died, stirred something in Marcus. A responsibility, perhaps, a connection to the past that couldn't be severed simply by walking away. "What does she want from me?" he asked, echoing his earlier question, but with less defensiveness. To hear about her father from someone who knew him, to understand what happened that day. Dr. Richards paused, and to thank the man who tried to save him, who brought him home when he could have saved himself instead. The words struck Marcus with unexpected force. For decades, he had carried the weight of his survival when others had died, had punished himself for living when men like Taylor had not. The possibility that his actions might be viewed not as a failure, but as a final act of brotherhood had never occurred to him. "I don't know if I can face her," he admitted, the words barely audible. "You faced worse in Quang Tri," Dr. Richards replied simply. "And you didn't run then." The quiet observation cut through Marcus's remaining resistance. She was right. Whatever courage he had possessed as a young soldier, whatever strength had carried him through that day in the jungle, must still exist somewhere within him, buried, perhaps, beneath years of guilt and self-destruction, but not entirely extinguished. "When?" he asked, the single word an acceptance. "Tomorrow, 2 o'clock. Dr. Richards leaned forward slightly. "But Mr. Johnson, there's something else we need to discuss, your current situation." Marcus tensed, anticipating judgment or unwanted intervention. "I manage. Living on the streets in winter is more than managing. It's gambling with your life." Her tone remained matter-of-fact, without accusation. "As a Medal of Honor recipient, you're entitled to certain benefits that you haven't been accessing. Housing assistance, health care, a pension." "I don't want charity," Marcus said stiffly. "It's not charity, it's what you earned." Dr. Richards' voice took on an edge of frustration. "Do you think Sergeant Taylor would want to see you living like this? The man you risked your life to bring home?" The question landed like a physical blow. Marcus had never considered his situation from that perspective, had never imagined what Taylor or any of his fallen comrades would think of his self-imposed exile from society. "We have a transitional housing unit available," Dr. Richards continued, her voice softening. "A room of your own, meals provided, no pressure or time limits, just a safe place while we work on getting your benefits reinstated and finding something permanent." The offer was tempting in a way Marcus hadn't expected. The prospect of a room, a bed, regular meals, simple comforts he had learned to live without. But accepting meant acknowledging his need, surrendering the independence that had been his last possession. "I don't know," he said finally. "I need to think about it." Dr. Richards nodded, accepting his ambivalence. "The offer stands, regardless of your decision about meeting Catherine Taylor." She rose from her desk. "In the meantime, is there anything else you need? A shower, clean clothes for tomorrow?" The suggestion, practical rather than pitying, addressed immediate concerns Marcus hadn't voiced. "Yes," he admitted, "that would help. We have facilities here for veterans in transition, toiletries, laundry, donated clothing." She checked. "A watch. If you come with me now, we can get you set up before the lunch rush." Marcus stood, suddenly aware of how he must appear and smell in the professional setting. The contrast between his current state and the soldier in the file photo was stark, a visual representation of all he had lost. As they left her office, Dr. Richards paused, turning to face him directly. "Mr. Johnson, I want to be clear about something. What you did in Quang Tri was extraordinary. The medal you received recognizes that. But what you do now, how you choose to live the life that was preserved that day, that's equally important." Her words resonated with unexpected clarity, cutting through the fog of shame and self-recrimination that had guided his existence for decades. For the first time in years, Marcus felt the faint stirring of possibility. Not hope exactly, but its distant cousin. A recognition that the past, while immutable, need not dictate the remainder of his life. "I'll be here tomorrow," he said quietly, "for Catherine Taylor." Dr. Richards smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her professional demeanor. "I believe you will." She gestured toward the elevator. "Now, let's get you ready to meet her." As they walked down the corridor, Marcus's hand unconsciously moved to the inner pocket where the Medal of Honor rested against his chest. Tomorrow, he would face Taylor's daughter, would confront the past he had fled for so long. The prospect was terrifying, but also, in some indefinable way, freeing. Like a prisoner glimpsing daylight after years in darkness, he sensed the possibility of a world beyond his self-imposed confinement. The Veteran Services Building stood silent in the early morning light, its brick facade warming in the tentative February sun. Marcus had arrived hours before his scheduled meeting with Catherine Taylor, unable to sleep in the transitional housing unit despite the comfort of a real bed. The night had been filled with fragmented dreams, jungle heat and helicopter rotors, Taylor's face and unfamiliar voices. He had risen at dawn, showered again, and dressed in the donated clothes provided the day before. The mirror in the small bathroom had been a shock, a stranger looking back at him, clean-shaven for the first time in years. The donated clothing, khaki pants, a blue button-down shirt and a navy sweater transformed him further. Without the layers of grime and tattered clothing, he looked almost ordinary, almost like the man he had been before, though older, more weathered, the years of hardship etched into the deep lines of his face. Now he sat on a bench outside Building C, watching staff arrive for the day shift, gathering courage for what lay ahead. The Medal of Honor was in his pocket, cleaned and polished. Dr. Richards had offered to have it professionally restored, but Marcus had declined. Some tarnish belonged, seemed right somehow, a physical manifestation of the complications surrounding the honor it represented. "Early again," observed a voice. Father Daniel approached, hands tucked into the pockets of a worn overcoat, military habit. Marcus managed a small smile, genuinely pleased to see the priest. "What are you doing here?" "Hospital visits, part of the job." Father Daniel sat beside him on the bench, maintaining a respectful distance. "You look different." "Feel different," Marcus admitted. The transformation went beyond hygiene and clothing. Something had shifted internally, a loosening of the rigid defenses he had maintained for decades. "Change can be uncomfortable," Father Daniel noted. "Even positive change." Marcus nodded, understanding precisely what the priest meant. The night in the transitional housing unit had been disconcerting despite its objective improvements over the church basement or park bench. The privacy, the softness of the mattress, the absence of constant vigilance, all represented an adjustment, a relearning of how to exist in the world. "I'm meeting someone today," Marcus said, "the daughter of a man who died under my command in Vietnam." Father Daniel absorbed this information without visible reaction. "That sounds significant." "I'm not sure what to tell her," Marcus confessed. "About her father, about what happened." "The truth has a way of finding its own words," the priest replied. He stood, adjusting his collar against the morning chill. "I should get to my rounds, but I'll be around if you need to talk afterward." Marcus watched him enter the building, struck by the unexpected support network forming around him. Dr. Richards, Father Daniel, even the young receptionist who had greeted him with recognition rather than suspicion. Small connections, tentative roots reaching into soil he had thought permanently barren. The hours crawled by. Marcus remained on the bench, too restless to go inside, too committed to leave. He watched the comings and goings of the VA Center, veterans of different eras arriving for appointments, staff hurrying between buildings, delivery trucks making their rounds. The ordered routine of institutional life unfolded around him, a world he had orbited but not entered for many years. At 1 o'clock, he finally went inside, passing through security with less scrutiny than the day before. His improved appearance granted him a level of invisibility different from what he was accustomed to, not the invisibility of being overlooked, but the anonymity of seeming ordinary, unremarkable. The Veterans Services reception area was busier than it had been the previous day. Several people waiting in the chairs along the wall. The young receptionist recognized him immediately, his transformation notwithstanding. "Mr. Johnson," he greeted with genuine warmth. "Dr. Richards said to send you right in when you arrived." He gestured toward her office door, now standing slightly ajar. Marcus nodded his thanks and walked across the reception area, feeling the curious glances of the waiting veterans. His hand trembled slightly as he knocked on the doorframe. "Come in," called Dr. Richards. Her office was as he remembered it, orderly, functional, the winter sun slanting through the blinds to create patterns on the polished desk. Dr. Richards rose as he entered, her expression approving as she took in his transformed appearance. "Mr. Johnson, you look well." "Thank you for the clothes," he said, still uncomfortable with gratitude, but making the effort. "And the room." "Did you sleep?" she asked, gesturing for him to sit. "Not much," he admitted. "It was different." She nodded, understanding the unspoken complexity. "It takes time to readjust. There's no rush." The simple acknowledgement that recovery would be a process, not an event, eased something in Marcus. The pressure to immediately reintegrate, to snap back into functional society after decades of isolation, had been an unvoiced fear. "Catherine Taylor will be here at 2, Dr. Richards continued. "She arrived in Westbridge last night. I spoke with her this morning, and she's both nervous and excited about meeting you." "What did you tell her about me?" Marcus asked, suddenly concerned about expectations. "About my situation?" "Just that you've had a difficult path since Vietnam, like many veterans of that era. Nothing specific." Dr. Richards adjusted her glasses. "Your story is yours to tell, Mr. Johnson, if and when you choose to tell it." The discretion was a gift he hadn't anticipated. No judgment, no pity, just professional respect for his privacy and autonomy. Something else he had forgotten existed in the world. "What is she like?" he asked, trying to form a mental image of Taylor's daughter. "Catherine. Thoughtful, determined. She's a high school history teacher in Seattle." Dr. Richards smiled slightly. "She has her father's eyes, based on the photos I've seen." The observation sent a jolt through Marcus. Taylor's eyes, dark brown, intelligent, often crinkled at the corners with his ready smile. The physical connection between past and present made the impending meeting suddenly more real, more consequential. A knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. The receptionist poked his head in. "Dr. Richards, Ms. Taylor is here. She's a bit early." Dr. Richards looked to Marcus, a question in her expression. He nodded, squaring his shoulders as if preparing for combat. "I'm ready." "Send her in, please," Dr. Richards instructed. Marcus stood, positioning himself near the window, needing the extra space for what was to come. His heart pounded in his chest, a drumbeat of anxiety and anticipation. The door opened again, and Catherine Taylor entered. She was in her early 50s, with short auburn hair streaked with silver, and her father's dark eyes. She wore a simple black pantsuit and carried a leather messenger bag. Her gaze went immediately to Marcus, and something in her expression, recognition, not of him personally, but of what he represented, made his throat tighten. "Ms. Taylor," Dr. Richards made the introduction. "This is Marcus Johnson." Catherine stepped forward, hand extended. "Mr. Johnson, thank you for agreeing to meet with me." Her voice was steady, controlled, but Marcus detected the emotion beneath the professional exterior. He took her hand, his own still calloused, despite years away from manual labor. "Ma'am, please call me Catherine." Dr. Richards gestured to the chairs. "Why don't we all sit down?" The three arranged themselves in the small office. Dr. Richards behind her desk, Catherine and Marcus in the visitor chairs. An awkward silence descended, the weight of history and expectation filling the space between them. "I'll keep this brief," Dr. Richards said, taking control of the moment. "As I explained to both of you, this meeting is entirely voluntary. I'm here only to facilitate, not to direct the conversation. You're welcome to use my office for as long as you need, and I can stay or go, whatever makes you both most comfortable." Catherine adjusted the strap of her messenger bag. "I appreciate the privacy of your office, Dr. Richards, but I don't think we need supervision." Marcus nodded his agreement, finding his voice. "We'll be fine." Dr. Richards stood. "I'll be in the conference room if you need me. Take all the time you need." She exited quietly, closing the door behind her. Alone with Taylor's daughter, Marcus felt the full weight of the moment descend. What could he possibly say to this woman that would matter, that would help, that would honor her father's memory without opening wounds better left closed? Catherine solved the dilemma by reaching into her messenger bag and removing a photograph. She held it out to Marcus. "This is the only picture I have of my father in Vietnam. I thought you might like to see it." Marcus accepted the photograph with careful hands. It showed a group of soldiers outside a tent, cigarettes dangling from tired smiles, arms draped over each other's shoulders in the casual brotherhood of combat units. Taylor stood in the center, his sergeant's stripes visible on his uniform, his face younger than Marcus remembered. Or perhaps it was just the photograph capturing a rare moment of relaxation. And there, at the edge of the group, stood a younger version of himself, thinner, more solemn than the others, but undeniably present, part of the unit, part of the brotherhood. "I don't remember this being taken," he said softly. "It was sent home in his last letter." Catherine watched him study the image. "You knew him well." Marcus handed the photograph back, choosing his words carefully. "He was my sergeant, a good leader, looked out for his men." "Tell me about him," Catherine requested, her voice gentle but firm. Not what was in the official reports or the condolence letter, what he was really like. The question opened a flood of memories. Taylor sharing his care packages with the newer soldiers, Taylor navigating by stars when their equipment failed, Taylor's unexpectedly beautiful singing voice during rare moments of downtime, small human details that had nothing to do with how he died and everything to do with how he had lived. He could find humor in anything, Marcus began, surprising himself with the immediacy of the recollection. Even in the worst conditions. Made terrible jokes about the food, the weather, the bugs. Kept our spirits up. He paused, another memory surfacing. He had pictures of you, showed them to everyone. So proud. Catherine's eyes glistened. "I was only 6 months old when he deployed. I have no memory of him at all." The admission pierced Marcus with unexpected sharpness. The realization that Taylor had never known his daughter, had never seen her grow up. One of countless losses from that senseless war, both for the dead and for the living. "He talked about what he would teach you when he got home," Marcus continued, the words coming more easily now. "Fishing. He grew up near a lake somewhere. Minnesota, I think. Said he'd teach you to fish better than any boy in your class." A small smile touched Catherine's lips. "My mother never mentioned that. She rarely talked about him at all. It was too painful for her." "I understand that," Marcus said quietly. The silence that followed was not uncomfortable, but contemplative, a shared acknowledgement of grief's complex legacy. Catherine finally broke it, her voice hesitant for the first time. "Mr. Johnson, I know this is difficult, but I need to ask about that day, about how my father died." Marcus had anticipated the question, had rehearsed possible responses throughout. The sleepless night. None seemed adequate in the face of her direct request, her need to understand the event that had shaped her life from infancy. "We were on patrol in Quang Tri province," he began, the words emerging with surprising steadiness. "Routine mission. Intelligence said the area was clear, but intelligence was often wrong." He described the ambush, the initial burst of gunfire from the tree line, the scramble for cover, the frantic radio calls for support. He spoke of Taylor's calm leadership even as the situation deteriorated, how he had organized their defense despite being outmanned and outgunned. "He was hit helping one of the younger soldiers to cover," Marcus continued, the memories now flowing like a river breaking through a dam. "I reached him just after it happened. The wound was severe. He knew it, told me to get the others out, to call for evacuation." Catherine listened without interruption, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, her father's eyes fixed on Marcus with unwavering attention. "I couldn't leave him there," Marcus said, his voice dropping, even when it was clear. "He was gone. I couldn't leave him for them to find." He stopped, unable to continue, the full horror of that day threatening to overwhelm him. The firefight, the blood-soaked jungle floor, the weight of Taylor's body as he carried him through. Enemy territory to the extraction point. Details too graphic, too painful to share with a daughter seeking understanding, not nightmares. "You brought him home," Catherine said softly. "You made sure he wasn't left behind." "Yes, that matters. It always mattered to my mother, knowing he didn't remain there, that she could visit a grave." She reached again into her messenger bag, this time withdrawing a small box. "I brought something for you." She opened the box to reveal a medal, not a military decoration, but a St. Christopher medal on a simple chain. This was his. He sent his dog tags home for safekeeping before his last mission, but he kept this with him. It was returned with his personal effects. Marcus stared at the medal, remembering how Taylor had often touched it before missions, a quiet ritual of faith or superstition or both. "I want you to have it," Catherine continued. "It seems right that it should belong to the man who carried him home." The offer stunned Marcus. This tangible connection to Taylor, this personal item that had witnessed his final moments, it was an unexpected gift, a gesture of gratitude he had never anticipated. "I can't accept that," he said reflexively. "It should stay with family." "You were his family too," Catherine insisted. "The brotherhood of soldiers. He would want you to have it." She placed the box on the desk between them. "Please." Marcus looked at the medal gleaming in its box, a symbol of protection that had failed its owner, but perhaps served a different purpose, creating this connection across decades, this moment of shared remembrance and understanding. "Thank you," he said finally, accepting the gift with the solemnity it deserved. "I'll keep it safe." Catherine nodded, satisfied. Then, with careful deliberation, she asked the question Marcus had been dreading since agreeing to the meeting. "Will you tell me how you earned the Medal of Honor that day?" His hand moved automatically to his pocket, feeling the weight of the medal there. "I don't remember all of it," he admitted. "There are gaps." "I've read the citation," Catherine said, "and the witness statements, but I wanted to hear it from you." Marcus struggled to find words that would convey the truth without glorifying the violence or understating the cost. "After your father was hit, something changed in me. Not courage exactly, more like absence of fear. Or maybe the fear was so complete it circled back to calm." He described what he could remember, returning multiple times to the exposed position to retrieve wounded comrades, establishing a defensive perimeter, coordinating the evacuation despite his own injuries. The clinical language of the citation transformed into the raw reality of splintered seconds and instinctive decisions. "I didn't do it for recognition," he finished, needing her to understand this essential truth. "I did it because they were my brothers, because your father would have done the same for any of us." Catherine was silent for a long moment, absorbing his words. Then she asked the question that cut to the heart of everything. Why did you disappear afterward? With the medal, the recognition. You could have had resources, support. The question demanded honesty. Marcus owed her that much. I couldn't reconcile being honored for surviving when your father and others didn't. The medal felt like a reward for failure, for not saving them all. Survivor's guilt, Catherine said, the term inadequate but recognizable. That and more. Marcus hesitated, then continued. Coming home was harder than staying there. At least in Vietnam, the danger was clear. Here, everything seemed meaningless after what we'd seen, what we'd done. So you chose to punish yourself, Catherine observed, not accusatory but understanding. Living on the streets, rejecting help, hiding the medal. Put so directly, the self-destructive pattern of his life seemed both obvious and irrational. Marcus had never articulated it, even to himself, in such clear terms. I guess I did, he acknowledged. The admission was surprisingly freeing, naming the behavior that had driven him for decades, recognizing its roots in guilt and unprocessed trauma rather than rational choice. My father wouldn't have wanted that for you, Catherine said with quiet certainty. Not after what you did for him, for all of them. The simple statement penetrated Marcus's defenses more effectively than any psychological intervention or well-intentioned outreach program. Taylor wouldn't have wanted this half-life for him, this self-imposed exile from society and connection. The realization was both painful and liberating. No, he agreed, he wouldn't have. Catherine reached across the space between them, briefly touching his hand, a human connection freely offered and gratefully received. It's not too late, you know, to live the life he would have wanted for you, that all of them would have wanted for you. The words hung in the air between them, a challenge and an absolution. Marcus felt something shift within him, a loosening of chains so long worn he had forgotten they were not part of his essential self. I'm trying, he said, the admission costing him less than he had expected. Just recently, starting to try. That's all anyone can do, Catherine replied. She glanced at her watch, genuine regret crossing her features. I have a flight back to Seattle this evening. I should go soon. Marcus felt an unexpected reluctance to end the conversation, this connection to Taylor and to a part of himself, long buried. Thank you for coming, for wanting to meet me. I'm the one who should be thanking you, Catherine said, gathering her belongings. You've given me something I've needed my whole life, a sense of who my father really was. Not just a name on a memorial or a folded flag, but a person, a leader, someone worth remembering. She stood, extending her hand once more. Marcus rose to shake it, the formal gesture inadequate for the significance of their exchange, but meaningful, nonetheless. If you ever want to talk again, Catherine said, retrieving a business card from her bag, I'd like to hear more stories about him. About all of you. Marcus accepted the card, another small thread connecting him to the world. I'd like that. As Catherine turned to leave, she paused at the door. Mr. Johnson, the medal you received, it's not just about what happened that day. It's about who you had to be, long before that moment, to do what you did when it mattered most. She smiled, her father's eyes crinkling at the corners just as his had done. Wear it with pride. You've earned that right. She left, closing the door softly behind her. Marcus remained standing, her words resonating with unexpected truth. The medal had never been about a single day's actions, but about the character that had made those actions possible. The same character now giving him the strength to face his past and perhaps claim a future. He took the Medal of Honor from his pocket, studying its tarnished surface in the afternoon light. For the first time in decades, He allowed himself to see it not as a burden, but as a testament to sacrifice, to brotherhood, to the enduring connections between those who serve together. Beside it, he placed the St. Christopher medal Catherine had given him, two symbols, different in meaning but united in purpose: protection, recognition, belonging, the very things he had denied himself for so long. A knock at the door announced Dr. Richards's return. She entered, reading his expression with professional acuity. "How did it go?" "Better than I expected," Marcus admitted. She's very much her father's daughter." Dr. Richards smiled. "I thought so, too." She gestured to the medals on her desk. "May I?" At his nod, she picked up the Medal of Honor, examining it with obvious reverence. "This belongs somewhere it can be seen, Mr. Johnson, not hidden away." "Maybe," Marcus conceded, not ready to go that far, but no longer rejecting the possibility outright. "I'm still getting used to the idea." "Fair enough." She returned the medal to him. "What about the housing situation? Have you given that more thought?" Marcus considered the question, weighing the comfort and safety of the transitional unit against his habitual independence. The conversation with Catherine had shifted something fundamental in his perspective, making the choice clearer than it had been the day before. "I'll stay," he decided, "at least for now, while we figure out the benefits, the next steps." The relief in Dr. Richards's expression was evident. "I think that's a wise choice. We can start the paperwork today, if you're ready." Marcus nodded, a sense of forward motion replacing the stagnation of recent decades. Small steps, uncertain but deliberate. A path unfolding where before there had been only aimless wandering. As they left her office, heading toward the administrative section to begin the process of reclaiming his official identity, Marcus felt the weight of both medals in his pocket. One given by a nation in recognition of valor, one given by a daughter in gratitude for bringing her father home. Different forms of the same essential acknowledgement that what we do for others matters, that connections endure even when broken by death or time or our own destructive choices. For the first time in years, Marcus walked with his head up, shoulders back, fully present in his own life. The medal he had carried in shame now rested against his heart as a reminder not of what he had lost, but of what remained possible: redemption, purpose, belonging. The very things Taylor and the others had fought for, had died for, the things he had denied himself for too long. It was time, finally, to honor their sacrifice by truly living. 6 months transformed Westbridge Park. Summer's lush abundance replaced winter's barren landscape, the once snow-covered grounds now vibrant with children playing, couples strolling, and seniors enjoying afternoon chess matches. The oak tree where Marcus had once made his temporary home stood majestic, its full canopy offering shade to picnicking families unaware of its history as reluctant shelter. Marcus observed these changes from a new vantage point, seated on a recently installed bench facing the central fountain. The plaque beside him read, "In honor of veterans who served, sacrificed, and returned home changed." The bench had been his idea, part of a community project he'd helped coordinate through the VA's Veteran Outreach Program. "Thought I'd find you here," said a familiar voice. Father Daniel settled beside him, clerical collar replaced by casual, attire for his day off. "How's civilian life treating you these days?" Marcus smiled, the expression no longer foreign to his features. "Getting easier. Some days I almost feel like I belong here." "You do belong here," Father Daniel replied, the simple affirmation carrying weight from a man who chose words carefully. "Everyone does." They sat in companionable silence, watching a young father teach his daughter to ride a bicycle, the child's face a mixture of terror and exhilaration as she wobbled forward on two wheels for the first time. "Got the apartment. Keys yesterday," Marcus said finally, the achievement still surprising even to himself. "Moving in next week." "Congratulations." Father Daniel's pleasure was genuine. "The one near downtown?" "Senior Veterans Housing Complex on Maple Street. Small studio, but it's mine." The concept of permanent housing, a space that belonged exclusively to him, that couldn't be taken away with changing weather or park regulations, remained both thrilling and daunting. "They're letting me help with the building maintenance in exchange for reduced rent. Perfect fit for your skills." Father Daniel nodded toward Marcus's hands, now calloused from work rather than survival. The 6 months in transitional housing had included vocational rehabilitation, with Marcus discovering a natural aptitude for maintenance and repair work. "Dr. Richards pulled some strings," Marcus acknowledged, still learning to accept help without seeing it as charity. "She's been, persistent," Father Daniel chuckled. "That's one word for it. Bulldozer with a medical degree is how some describe her." The characterization was affectionate rather than critical. Dr. Eleanor Richards had become Marcus's most determined advocate, navigating bureaucratic obstacles with ruthless efficiency to restore his benefits, arrange medical care, and connect him with housing opportunities. Her crusade had expanded beyond Marcus to other homeless veterans in Westbridge, earning her both admirers and detractors within the VA system. "Speaking of the good doctor," Father Daniel said, "she mentioned you're considering her proposal." Marcus shifted slightly, uncomfortable with the attention the project was generating. "Still thinking about it." "Fair enough." Father Daniel changed the subject, respecting Marcus's reticence. "Will you join us for dinner Thursday? Maria's making her famous lasagna." The invitation to the priest's family dinner was becoming a weekly tradition, another thread in the social fabric gradually rewrapping around Marcus's life. Maria, Father Daniel's sister and housekeeper at the rectory, had taken an almost maternal interest in Marcus's reintegration, insisting that proper nutrition was fundamental to recovery. "Wouldn't miss it," Marcus replied, genuinely anticipating the meal and companionship. The park's ancient clock tower chimed 3, reminding Marcus of his next commitment. "I should get going. Meeting at the center at 3:30. They parted with a simple handshake, the friendship between them comfortable in its understatement. Marcus walked through the park, nodding to familiar faces, the regular chess players who had initially regarded him with suspicion, but now saved him a seat, the morning joggers who waved in recognition, the park's department workers who consulted him on bench placements and garden designs. Small connections, seemingly insignificant individually, but collectively forming a community that had been absent from his life for decades. Each greeting, each acknowledged presence reinforced his gradual return from invisibility. The Westbridge Veterans Center occupied a renovated warehouse at the edge of downtown, its industrial exterior softened by a mural depicting service members from different eras. Marcus entered through the main doors, the security guard greeting him by name, not as a potential threat to be monitored, but as a recognized member of the center's community. "They're waiting for you in the conference room," the guard informed him. "Dr. Richards is already here with the mayor." Marcus thanked him, navigating the center's bustling main hall with increasing confidence. 6 months ago, he would have hugged the walls, avoiding eye contact, trying to minimize his presence. Now he moved with purpose, exchanging greetings with staff and fellow veterans as he passed. The conference room door stood open, revealing A gathering more substantial than Marcus had anticipated. Dr. Richards sat at the head of the table, engaged in animated conversation with Mayor Williams. Catherine Taylor, visiting from Seattle for the second time since their initial meeting, occupied a chair near the center. Representatives from various veterans organizations, local media, and city council members filled the remaining seats. Marcus hesitated at the threshold, momentarily overwhelmed by the audience. Dr. Richards spotted him, her professional demeanor warming with genuine pleasure. "Mr. Johnson," she called, rising to greet him. "Right on time. Please join us." He entered, accepting handshakes and introductions with growing ease. Catherine hugged him briefly, a gesture that would have terrified him months ago, but now felt natural, even comforting. They had maintained regular correspondence since her first visit, building a connection that honored her father's memory while establishing its own independent value. "Marcus," Mayor Williams extended his hand. "Good to see you again. Dr. Richards has been filling us in on the progress, but we'd love to hear directly from you." Marcus took the offered seat at the table's center, all eyes now focused on him. 6 months of therapy sessions and group meetings had gradually diminished his fear of attention, though public speaking remained challenging. "As you know," Dr. Richards began, sensing his discomfort, "we've been developing the Veterans Visibility Initiative based on Marcus's experiences and insights. The concept has evolved considerably since our initial discussions." She gestured toward a presentation board displaying architectural renderings of a renovated building. "The old Westbridge Hotel has been donated for conversion into a multi-service center for veterans, with particular emphasis on outreach to those experiencing homelessness or isolation." The mayor leaned forward. "What we're most interested in, Marcus, is your perspective on the Medal of Honor recipients' mentorship program. It's an innovative approach that could be replicated nationwide if successful." Marcus cleared his throat, finding his voice. "The concept is simple. Veterans who've received high-level commendations partner with homeless or struggling veterans, creating a connection based on shared service and mutual respect rather than clinical intervention." The simplicity of the idea belied its potential. Impact? Marcus had discovered through his own journey that traditional outreach often failed because it positioned homeless veterans as problems to be solved rather than warriors who had lost their way. The mentorship program inverted this dynamic, honoring the service of both parties while creating a bridge back to community. "We've identified 12 Medal of Honor recipients nationally who've expressed interest," Dr. Richards continued, "plus numerous recipients of the Silver Star, Navy Cross, and other distinguished service medals. Each would mentor 3 to 5 veterans, creating a support network outside the formal VA structure." "And you'll serve as the program's first mentor?" asked a city council member, directing the question to Marcus. "If the proposal is approved," he replied carefully, the prospect of mentoring other veterans, of using his own painful journey as a roadmap for others, remained intimidating despite months of consideration. "I think what Mr. Johnson is too modest to explain," Catherine interjected, "is how transformative this peer-based approach can be. Traditional interventions often fail because they don't address the core issue, the loss of identity and purpose, that comes when warriors return to civilian life without their brotherhood." The insight, coming from Taylor's daughter, carried particular weight with Marcus. She had developed a nuanced understanding of veteran issues through their conversations, and her own research, becoming an unexpected ally in the project's development. "Exactly," Dr. Richards affirmed, "which brings us to today's announcement. The Department of Veterans Affairs has approved initial funding for a 3-year pilot program here in Westbridge. If Marcus agrees to serve as our first mentor, we can begin operations by year's end." All eyes returned to Marcus, the decision now squarely in his hands. He felt the weight of expectation, but also the genuine opportunity to transform his hardest experiences into something meaningful for others. "I need to be clear about something," he said, his voice steadier than expected. "I'm not a success story yet. I'm still figuring things out, still have bad days. If I do this, it won't be as someone who has all the answers." "That's precisely why you're the right person," Mayor Williams replied. "Veterans don't need perfect role models. They need authentic ones, people who understand the struggle because they're living it themselves." The validation resonated with Marcus's own journey. His most significant progress had come not from clinical interventions alone, but from connections with people who recognized his humanity beneath the layers of trauma and isolation. "In that case," he said, the decision crystallizing as he spoke. "I'm in." The announcement triggered a round of applause, surprising Marcus with its enthusiasm. Dr. Richards caught his eye across the table, her expression a mixture of professional satisfaction and personal pride. She had believed in this possibility long before he could see it himself. As the meeting transitioned to logistical details, Marcus found himself observing the scene with a strange sense of detachment. Not the dissociation of his worst days, but a momentary stepping back to appreciate the distance traveled. 6 months ago, he had been huddled beneath an oak tree, anonymous and alone. Now he sat at a conference table, his name and experiences forming the foundation for a program that might help others like him. The transformation seemed impossible, yet the evidence surrounded him. In Catherine's friendship, in Dr. Richards's advocacy, in the respect shown by community leaders who now valued his insights. Most importantly, in his own gradually healing sense of identity and purpose. After the meeting adjourned, Catherine accompanied him on his walk back to the transitional housing unit. The summer evening was pleasant, the lengthening shadows offering relief from the day's heat. "You were right about the park," she observed as they passed the central fountain. "It's beautiful in summer." "Different place entirely," Marcus agreed, remembering how he had described the seasonal transformation in one of their email exchanges. "Like people," Catherine said thoughtfully, "same essential structure, but completely transformed by circumstance and season." The observation struck Marcus as profoundly accurate. He was structurally the same man who had hidden beneath layers of grime and isolation, yet fundamentally transformed by the changing seasons of his life. "Do you think you'll ever wear it publicly?" Catherine asked, changing the subject. "The medal?" Marcus understood the question referred not just to the physical object, but to the identity it represented. Medal of Honor recipient, decorated veteran, someone whose service had been recognized at the highest level. An identity he had rejected. "For decades, I'm considering it," he admitted. "For the program launch, if it happens. Dr. Richards thinks it would be powerful." "It would," Catherine agreed, "but only if you're ready." They reached the transitional housing complex, pausing at the entrance. Catherine would return to Seattle the following day, their regular email correspondence resuming until her next visit. "I'm glad you came," Marcus said, the expression of gratitude coming more naturally than it once had. "It helps, having you here for this decision." "I wouldn't have missed it," Catherine replied. "Dad would be proud of what you're doing, for yourself and for others." The reference to Taylor no longer triggered immediate pain or guilt. Through their conversations, the shared photographs, the stories exchanged, Taylor had gradually transformed. In Marcus's mind, from a source of regret to a motivation for living meaningfully. "I hope so," he said simply. After Catherine departed, Marcus returned to his small room in the transitional unit. The space, though temporary, carried markers of his evolving identity: books on a small shelf, a potted plant on the windowsill, A calendar marking appointments and commitments, small artifacts of a life re-engaging with the world. On the modest desk sat a wooden display case, handcrafted by Marcus during his vocational training. Inside, cushioned on dark blue velvet, rested the Medal of Honor, no longer hidden in a pocket or wrapped in cloth, but displayed with tentative pride. Beside it lay Taylor's St. Christopher Medal, the two symbols now inseparable companions in Marcus's journey. He opened the case, removing the Medal of Honor for his evening ritual. What had begun as Dr. Richard's therapeutic suggestion had evolved into a meaningful practice, holding the medal, acknowledging its weight both literal and symbolic, reconnecting with the identity it represented. Tonight, the ritual carried additional significance. By agreeing to serve as the program's first mentor, Marcus had taken another step toward reintegrating the fractured pieces of his identity. The decorated soldier, the homeless veteran, the man now cautiously rebuilding a life of purpose and connection. He replaced the medal in its case, his decision solidifying. For the program launch, he would wear it publicly for the first time since the original ceremony, not as a symbol of personal accomplishment, but as a beacon for others still lost in the wilderness he had inhabited for so long. The following morning dawned clear and warm, Marcus's final therapy session scheduled before Catherine's departure. The VA Medical Center felt different now, no longer an institutional labyrinth to be avoided, but a familiar environment where his presence was expected and welcomed. Dr. Harriman, his assigned therapist, greeted him with professional warmth. "I understand congratulations are in order. Dr. Richards mentioned you've agreed to the mentorship role." "Still processing it," Marcus admitted, taking his usual seat. "Feels presumptuous, in some ways. Guiding others when I'm still finding my own path." "That's precisely what makes you qualified," Dr. Harriman observed, echoing Mayor Williams's sentiment from the previous day. "Your journey is ongoing, authentic. You're not claiming perfection or instant transformation." The validation helped ease Marcus's lingering doubts. Over 6 months of weekly sessions, Dr. Harriman had proven adept at distinguishing between legitimate concerns and the reflexive self-doubt ingrained by decades of isolation and shame. "Let's talk about your new apartment," the therapist suggested, guiding the conversation toward practical matters. "Any concerns about the transition?" Marcus considered the question seriously. "Some. The independence is both appealing and intimidating, being solely responsible for a space again, after so long without one." They explored the anxiety together, identifying specific concerns and practical solutions. The session followed a familiar pattern, acknowledging struggles without being defined by them, celebrating progress without ignoring continuing challenges. A balanced approach that had gradually restored Marcus's sense of agency and possibility. As their time concluded, Dr. Harriman offered a final observation. "You know, when we started these sessions, you spoke almost exclusively in the past tense. Your stories, your identity, your relationships, all located in a past you couldn't reclaim. Now, you primarily use the present and future tense. It's a significant linguistic shift." The observation startled Marcus with its accuracy. His mental landscape had indeed transformed from a fixation on what had been lost to an engagement with what remained possible. The change had been so gradual, he hadn't recognized it until it was articulated. "Something to think about," Dr. Harriman said, noting Marcus's thoughtful expression. "See you next week. Same time?" "Actually," Marcus replied, "I need to reschedule. I have an interview at the Veterans Housing Complex. They're considering me for a part-time maintenance position." "Even better." Dr. Harriman made a note in his calendar. "Thursday afternoon." The simple exchange, the rescheduling of an Appointment to accommodate employment opportunity represented normalcy slowly returning. Marcus was reclaiming not just housing and health care, but the ordinary rhythms of responsible adult life. After the session, he met Catherine for a final coffee before her departure. They chose an outdoor cafe near the park, the summer morning perfect for al fresco conversation. Marcus ordered without hesitation or discomfort, another small victory in his reintegration. "I've been thinking about your question," he said as they waited for their drinks. "About wearing the medal publicly." Catherine leaned forward, attentive. "And? I'll wear it for the program launch, not just because Dr. Richards thinks it would be effective, but because I'm starting to understand what you said, that it represents more than that one day." "What does it represent to you now?" Catherine asked, her interest genuine rather than therapeutic. Marcus considered the question, organizing thoughts that had been clarifying gradually over months of recovery. "Possibility, I think. The capacity for extraordinary action existing within ordinary people, not just in combat, but in daily life, in recovery, in helping others." Their coffee arrived, temporarily pausing the conversation. Marcus added cream to his, a small preference rediscovered after years of accepting whatever was available without consideration of taste or enjoyment. "I've brought something for you," Catherine said, retrieving an envelope from her bag. "Photos I found when cleaning out my mother's attic after she moved to assisted living." Inside the envelope, Marcus discovered black and white photographs he had never seen, Taylor with their unit during training, before deployment, young faces untouched by combat, smiling with naive confidence at their own invincibility. And there he was, standing beside Taylor, both in freshly pressed uniforms, arms around each other's shoulders like brothers. "I thought you might want copies for the new apartment," Catherine explained, "something connecting past and present." The thoughtfulness of the gift, acknowledging both his history and his future, moved Marcus deeply. "Thank you. They'll be the first things I hang on the walls." Their conversation shifted to practical matters: Catherine's teaching schedule, Marcus's upcoming move, their plans for continued correspondence. The ease between them was a small miracle in itself, a friendship forged from tragedy but sustained by genuine connection. As they prepared to part, Catherine asked a final question. "What do you hope the mentorship program will accomplish? Beyond the official goals, I mean." Marcus considered his answer carefully. "Recognition, not in the sense of awards or accolades, but in the most basic human sense, seeing and being seen. What drove me to the streets, kept me there so long, wasn't just trauma or addiction or systemic failures, it was invisibility. The feeling that my true self, not just the homeless veteran, but the whole person I had been and still was, had vanished from the world's awareness." Catherine nodded, understanding. "And the program can change that?" "It can create a space where veterans recognize each other's full humanity," Marcus affirmed. "Where the man sleeping under a bridge is still Captain Reynolds who saved his platoon. Where the woman battling addiction is still Lieutenant Hernandez who flew medevac missions under fire. Where service isn't negated by struggle." The vision, articulated more clearly than he had managed in formal meetings, captured the essence of his own journey, not just from homelessness to housing, but from invisibility to recognition, from isolation to community. "That's worth fighting for," Catherine said simply. They parted with a hug, plans made for her next visit in 3 months' time. Marcus watched her cab depart, feeling not the hollow ache of separation that had characterized so much of his life, but the comfortable certainty of continuing connection. The remainder of the day unfolded with purposeful routine. A meeting with his housing coordinator, lunch at the Veterans Center, an afternoon shift volunteering with the center's outreach team. each activity connecting him more firmly to the community he was rejoining, each interaction reinforcing his gradual return from the margins to the mainstream of society. Evening found him back in the park, seated on the veteran's bench as sunset painted the western sky in brilliant oranges and purples. The Medal of Honor rested in his pocket, no longer hidden from shame, but carried with emerging acceptance of all it represented. Valor and trauma, recognition and responsibility, past actions and future possibilities. A young veteran he recognized. From the center approached, hesitantly taking a seat at the opposite end of the bench. Marcus had seen him at group sessions, but never spoken directly with him. The young man's posture, shoulders hunched, gaze downcast, body angled for quick departure, was painfully familiar, a physical manifestation of isolation within crowded spaces. "Evening," Marcus offered, keeping his tone casual, non-intrusive. The young man nodded without making eye contact. "Evening, sir." The honorific, automatic from a junior veteran to a senior one, created an opening, a thin thread of military connection spanning the gulf of civilian alienation. "Marcus Johnson," he introduced himself, not pushing for reciprocation, but offering the possibility. "Dave Lawson," the young man replied after a moment's hesitation. "Afghanistan, 2 tours." The minimal self-identification was significant, not name alone, but service included. Identity still anchored in military experience rather than civilian accomplishment or current circumstance. "Vietnam," Marcus responded in kind. "Just 1 tour. All I could handle." The small admission of limitation, of struggle, visibly relaxed Lawson's defensive posture. Not a recruitment pitch or motivational speech, but an acknowledgement of shared vulnerability. They sat in companionable silence as the sunset deepened, the park gradually emptying as families headed home for dinner and bedtime routines. Finally, Lawson spoke again, his voice barely audible. "Does it get easier being back, I mean?" The question carried echoes across generations, from Marcus's own return through countless veterans of forgotten conflicts to this young man, struggling to reintegrate after modern warfare, no less traumatic for its technological advances. "Not easier," Marcus replied honestly. "Different. The memories don't fade, but their power changes. You build a life around them instead of being consumed by them." It wasn't the facile reassurance of traditional outreach, the promise that time heals all wounds, or that happiness awaited just beyond the next therapeutic breakthrough. It was the hard-won truth of his own experience, that recovery wasn't about erasing the past, but about creating a present and future large enough to contain it without being defined by it. "I can't see it," Lawson admitted, the simple confession clearly costing him. "A future, I mean. Can't imagine what it looks like." Marcus nodded, understanding completely. "I couldn't either, for decades." He paused, weighing his next words carefully. "But I was wrong. There was one waiting all along. Just needed help finding my way to it." As darkness settled over the park, 2 men from different wars sat side by side on a bench dedicated to veterans who had served, sacrificed, and returned home changed. One nearing the end of a long journey back from the wilderness, one still at its beginning. Between them, the invisible thread of recognition, of seeing and being seen, not just for their service or their struggles, but for their complete humanity. In his pocket, the Medal of Honor seemed to pulse with renewed purpose, not just a symbol of past courage, but a beacon for future possibility. The medal that had once represented everything Marcus had lost now embodied everything that remained possible: connection, purpose, the chance to transform personal suffering into service to others. The park lights flickered on, illuminating the path forward one section at a time, just as recovery did, not revealing the entire journey at once, but providing enough light for the next step, and the next, and the next. Marcus Johnson, once invisible, was finally fully seen. And in being seen, he gained the greatest power of all, the ability to truly see others, to recognize in them the warriors still standing beneath the weight of civilian struggle, to offer not just help, but understanding, not just services, but solidarity. The medal had always been more than recognition of a single day's courage. It was, as Catherine had said, about who he had needed to be long before that moment, to do what he did when it mattered most. That same character had sustained him through decades of isolation and was now guiding him back, not just to society, but to purpose. The circle completed itself, not in the perfect symmetry of fiction, but in the messy, authentic way of real human redemption. The homeless veteran with a Medal of Honor hidden beneath his coat had become a mentor, a bridge, a living reminder that valor comes in many forms, including the courage to begin again, to accept help, to rejoin the world that had once seemed irretrievably lost. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, Marcus made a silent promise to Taylor, to all those who hadn't returned, to the young veteran beside him, and finally, to himself. The journey forward would honor the sacrifices of the best by creating a future where no warrior walked alone. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.